This is the monster called horror. They prowl in the darkness of the night to hunt human beauties. Their biggest hobby is collecting human body parts to decorate themselves. So there are also some people who specialize in hunting this monster. They clean up the filth of the world with their extraordinary power. His name is Sword and he is the chosen knight of the demon world. Apparently he was hunting the wrong target this time. The report indicates horror only hunts down red-haired beauties. This city is apparently very prosperous, but it's a veritable crime city. The city is full of robberies and thefts, drunks molesting beautiful women in the street. This day Sophie found a famous fortune teller. Before she could say anything, he knew she was looking for someone, and he knew the girl was looking for El Dorado. The next moment he changed his face. He was on top of Sophie. Sophie fought to get away from him and hide in a small room. The room was filled with red-haired dolls. The atmosphere was so scary that she was terrified. She gathered the courage to crawl forward. She broke the window and tried to climb down the drain pipe. At that moment, horror had already caught up with her. Sword suddenly appeared out of nowhere and punched him away. But horror struggled and sprang up to fight back. But horror, struggling to fight back, was easily knocked down by Sword. Seeing that he was losing the fight, horror grabbed Sophie as a hostage, then carried Sophie and jumped to the roof of the building. Then he threw Sophie downstairs. Sword had no choice but to go to Sophie's rescue first, and horror took the opportunity to escape. Then Sword took Sophie to have a late-night snack. With Sword's explanation, Sophie learned about the unique characteristics of this monster, and the recent series of disappearances are all red-haired women. It is obvious that horror did it, and horror will never give up on his target. At that moment a waiter handed over a note. Sword took a look at the note. It was where the horror was hiding. In order to eliminate horror once and for all, Sophie took the initiative to be the bait. Sure enough, horror found her in no time. At that moment Sword suddenly appeared. Soon they fought together. However, horror was no match for Sword. With a few swift punches, Sword knocked horror to the ground. Sword took the opportunity to ask him if he knew about El Dorado's news. Sophie was shocked to hear this, because she also wanted to find this place. But horror said, El Dorado is not for people like you to reach. Then he glowed red. After the smoke he became even bigger and more hideous. That's when Sword shouted. A heavy-duty motorcycle emerged onto the bridge. Sword takes Sophie on a heavy motorcycle to escape the attack and rushes into the city. Horror is in hot pursuit. Having temporarily escaped horror's pursuit, he puts Sophie down. Then he took out his giant sword. Riding a heavy motorcycle and jumping high in the air, he smashes horror right in the face. Then he dragged horror and charged towards the bridge. Just then, the heavy-duty motorcycle he was riding started spinning in place, and the giant sword drew a magic circle on the ground. After a flash of holy light, he turned into a demon knight. He was dressed in golden armor, and even the heavy motorcycle turned golden. He kept attacking horror. Finally, he shot the giant sword out of his hand. The sword pierced horror's head and crashed into the tanker behind him. With a violent explosion and a huge fire, horror was completely killed. The bridge was also destroyed. The sudden accident caused the surrounding residents to look around. Meanwhile, Sword was still on his way to find El Dorado. He will continue to hunt other horrors of different species. A worker on the bridge is calling the police, saying he saw the monster destroying the bridge. At a high point not far away, a man watches everything. He loaded a bullet into the sniper rifle in his hand. Then he fired a shot into the sky. A huge scarlet spell appeared in the sky. It covered the whole city. Immediately, the sky was raining. Soon after, the workers who were talking about the monster, as if they had forgotten everything that had just happened. Have you ever seen such a self-disciplined night-running monster? Every day, he runs 3 times around the city at night. He was a champion sprinter. Almost every time he won an award and enjoyed the cheers of his fans, until an accident left Hadi's legs paralyzed. He could no longer run. He had to live under the care of his girlfriend. Looking at the wall of trophies and medals, he couldn't control his emotions anymore. He hated the world for being unfair and hated everyone who had good legs. This powerful resentment of his, horror found him. Suddenly a voice came to his ears. The voice said he could help Hadi realize his dream again. Upon hearing the promise of the horror, Hadi couldn't resist the temptation and agreed to the deal. He expressed that he was willing to do anything to continue his dream of running, no matter the conditions. Suddenly a red light appeared and a demonic black shadow encroached on his body. In this moment, it was as if Hadi's eyes could see the long-lost racetrack again. He once again enjoyed the joy of running, speeding through the streets in the dead of night. The surging adrenaline made Hadi burst out laughing uncontrollably. Having accepted the devil's terms, he has become horror. After his workout, he's about to start eating. Meanwhile, there was someone else who had also detected Hadi's presence. His name is Luke. He is a demon mage who specializes in hunting horror. Watching the other side move at high speed, he thought that Hadi had found him. Immediately speed up and continue to chase him, but cannot catch up. He did not understand what Hadi was running around in the middle of the night. In fact, Hadi was just enjoying the feeling of running. The next day Luke traveled alone through every corner of the city. Everywhere he went, he would use his hands to touch. Seems to be forming a magic formation. At that moment a woman came. She was none other than Hadi's girlfriend. Hadi suddenly disappeared last night. She wanted to know if anyone had seen him. Luke ignored her and left. At that moment Sword suddenly appeared. She wanted to help this woman. During the exchange, they learned that the missing Hadi was a champion sprinter. The two of them suddenly realized that Horror, who ran fast last night, was the woman's boyfriend. After receiving this news, Sword and Luke are ready to take action. At the end of the night, the woman comes home. Hadi was already waiting for her at home. She was shocked to find Hadi standing up, but Hadi kept saying he was hungry. No matter how much he ate, he couldn't get enough. Suddenly his eyes turned red, immediately turned into a monster and jumped on his girlfriend. Fortunately, Sword appeared in time to save her. Horror seized the opportunity to escape. Sword chased after him. With a cry, he summoned his heavy motorcycle, tracking Horror through the city. Hadi has now completely transformed into Horror. The sword descended from the sky in its golden armor. A sword pierced his shoulder, but it still doesn't affect Horror's speed. The speed of terror is too fast. Sword could not stop him. He can only attempt to drive Horror to Luke's ambush site. Sword found the opportunity to accelerate in a straight line. He came right in front of Horror and blinded him with his high-beam headlights. The sudden glare disoriented Horror, causing him to accidentally run towards a nearby side road. Luke was waiting for Horror on the roof. Luke then fired a shot with his enchanted sniper rifle, but it missed the vitals of Horror. Luke was about to fire the next shot. A resident suddenly appeared. Luke was affected and missed the shot. Luke quickly changed his position in search of the next opportunity to take a shot at Horror. He fired again. This shot didn't kill Horror completely, but Sword had already caught up with him. With Sword and Luke working together, Horror was completely killed. Sword tries to comfort Hadi's girlfriend. At that moment, it was raining again. No doubt, Luke uses magic to erase people's memories of Horror. Then the city returned to peace. The woman forgot what happened that night. She continued to wander the streets in search of Hadi. At a pool party organized by the mob boss Damien, a sexy blonde caught the attention of all the men present. Clearly, she succeeded in getting Damien's attention, and her goal is to get close to Damien. Her name is Gina, and she and Sword are both knights of the demon world. Their mission is to eliminate the monster known as Horror in the human world. This monster would invade the human world in various forms, and Gina suspected that Damien might be raising a human-eating Horror, so she plans to infiltrate the building to investigate and find the Horror. However, she needed Damien's DNA activation card to temporarily disable the security system in his building. So Gina decided to use a beauty trick.
Sexy.
At that moment, Damien was clearly drawn to Gina's beauty. On the other hand, in Damien's building, the Sword is crawling along the ventilation ducts and complaining. Anything related to Gina is definitely not good. Gina and Damien are already having a heated discussion. She pulls out a straw and tries to get Damien's DNA to stick to it. So she handed the glass to Damien. Damien didn't use a straw at all. He picked up the glass and drank it all. Gina had no choice but to move into Damien's arms, kissed him deeply, then she got up and left. She said she was going to take a shower and asked Damien to wait here for her. Watching Gina's back made Damien's brain stop functioning. Then Gina used a portable DNA extraction device. The next moment, Damien's DNA information was read out. But then Gina was suddenly held at gunpoint. Wade grabbed the device from Gina's hand. Suddenly, Gina attacked. She questioned Wade if he was aware of the hidden room on the roof. Wade revealed what he knew. He witnessed with his own eyes that the monster hiding on the top floor was devouring people. Gina told him to stay out of the way because he knew what it was. Otherwise, you'll all be eaten. On the other hand, Sword was climbing the elevator cable. The room on the top floor is gradually getting closer. At this moment, Gina easily takes care of the guards and sneaks into the control room. Damien received a message. The whereabouts of Gina have been discovered. In the surveillance footage, Sword made it to the top floor corridor. Gina removed the information card containing Damien's DAN to control the equipment. Instantly, the entire electrical system of the building is paralyzed. But it only lasts for 60 seconds. The Sword raced against time and ran all the way, aiming to enter the secret room before the building's security system was restored. Finally, he managed to pry open the steel door with his bare hands. At that moment, the building's electrical system was restored, and Damien had already arrived with a gun. The smart Gina instantly becomes a victim, claiming that she had been forced by Sword. She said and crouched on the ground, holding her head and crying. But Damien didn't seem to mind and appeared confident. At that moment, Sword entered the secret room. He saw blood stains on the floor. Not far away, an old-fashioned computer suddenly started up. It turns out that horror had possessed the computer this time. At that moment, countless tentacles started to attack the Sword. But in front of Sword's great strength, these tentacles were easily eliminated by Sword, and a punch to blow up the old computer. Horror is enraged and wants to eat everyone in the building to increase its strength. Gina quickly grabbed a shotgun and loaded it with magic bullets, ordering everyone to run for their lives. At this moment, the horror revealed its true face. It was an LCD monitor. Damien is pointing his gun at Gina's head. He hates Gina and Sword for ruining everything for him. Suddenly, the tentacles broke through the magic circle and wrapped around Damien. Gina quickly ran to his aid, using her red high heels as sharp knives to cut off the tentacles and rescue Damien. However, the situation was getting worse with more and more tentacles on the wall. Meanwhile, Sword was donning his golden armor and fighting the horror. Thousands of tentacles were easily severed by the Sword. Finally, Sword fell from the sky, and a knife would be completely finished with horror. The crisis on Gina's end was also resolved. Wade didn't understand why Gina wanted to save Damien. She didn't say anything, but she gently kissed Wade on the cheek, leaving him speechless. At the bar, they still hadn't found any news about El Dorado, but the newspaper reported that Damien had been killed by a gunshot. Her name is Sophie. Not long ago, her brother suddenly vanished, leaving only the words El Dorado on his computer. To uncover clues about El Dorado, she took it upon herself to find out where horror might be. Only horror would know about El Dorado's clues. Recently, there have been rumors circulating about strange occurrences at a priest's residence. Sophie made her way to the priest's residence, where she learned that the priest had a beautiful sister named Phyllis who had been ill and had not shown her face recently. So she went to the church and found the gentle Phyllis in the courtyard. They quickly became friends. During their conversation, she learned that the priest had recently disappeared. As their experiences were similar, they felt a sense of sympathy towards each other. Suddenly, there was a knock on the door. It was Sword who arrived. He pretended not to know Sophie and pushed her aside, holding a bouquet of flowers, and approached Phyllis, expressing his love for her. Sophie was left speechless by the scene. Phyllis also hesitated and picked up the flowers. Sword then turned and left, telling Sophie to make sure to return home that night. Waiting for Sword to leave, Sophie only realized she still had many questions for Sword. Phyllis gazed at the flowers in her hand. Remember that when she was young, there were also handsome and sunny boys, expressing his love to her in this manner. But a voice woke her from her dream. Sophie chased Sword and asked him about El Dorado, but Sword completely ignored her. He summoned a heavy motorcycle, hopped on, fleeing. Sophie had no choice but to return to church. At Phyllis's invitation, Sophie has dinner with her. As the night grew later, Sophie forgot about Sword's warning. Phyllis shared a story about her brother, who was deeply in love with her and often spoke highly of her beauty. He never allowed her to leave the house or talk to men. Once, a man confessed his love to her, but her brother beat her mercilessly and threw her into a dark basement, keeping her captive for himself. As an adult woman, she also yearned for a man's affection. In a state of panic, Sophie stumbled and fell into the basement. She quickly locked the door, leaving Phyllis outside with no signal on her phone to call for help. She turned on the lights in the basement and was completely taken aback. There were various types of blood-stained torture instruments. The long hair on the stool was a sign that Phyllis may have been subjected to inhumane treatment here. In the corner was a skeleton with half of its facial tissue missing. Suddenly, Phyllis broke through the boards and climbed out of the ceiling. It appears she has become a horror. She picked up the skull and said it was all your fault, then started eating it. Then, she transformed into a monster and lunged at Sophie. Suddenly, the roof collapsed, burying Horror in rubble and wood. It was Sword who came. Horror then breaks out from the ground. He grabbed the Horror and ran outside, warning Sophie to stay put, but Sophie decides to go and help. Watching this battle is beyond the capabilities of humans. Sophie reaches the bell tower and drops the ropes. Looking down at the two men at a standstill, she is pushing the clock with all her might. Just as Sword kicked Horror away and plummeted to the bottom of the bell tower, the clock also tumbled down with the sound. At that moment, Sword transformed into a golden armored knight and killed the Horror with a single stroke. Desperate to find her brother, Sophie caught up with Sword, tears streaming down her face, and begged for his help. This reminded him of the sister he had lost, and he agreed to take Sophie with him on his journey. The wealthy woman changes her husband every 3 days because all the male pets around her mysteriously die. When she was young, she was an actress and, in order to become famous, she made a pact with the devil and gave herself to him, to summon a monster named Horror to help her climb to the top of her life. On this day, the two demonic knights who hunted Horror received a message. Viola was an unknown actress when she was young. Then, her competitors had accidents one after the other. At the peak of her career, she married a well-known local businessman. Shortly after, her husband passed away in an accident. And so Viola inherited a fortune. After all these years, Viola has become a child specialist. Currently, she is starting to accept consultations from wealthy families to help them manage their disobedient children. Rumor has it that she has a ring that can control demons. A ring that brings good luck to her. But even the demon couldn't save her figure, unfortunately. Sword and Gina pretend to be a couple to attend Viola's party, and Sophie pretends to be their daughter. They pretend to ask Viola for help with discipline for their daughter. They actually came to investigate if there was any horror here. There are many wives of wealthy businessmen and celebrities here. They compete to see who can have the most expensive jewelry. Viola was already drawn to Sword's strong physique. She took Sword's hand and slowly walked towards him. In order to stall for time, Sword had to remain silent. So Viola took Sword to her room. On the other hand, Gina took the opportunity to delve into the depths of the mansion with Sophie. This is the room where the children in care are staying. Now it was empty. In the corner, they found a diary belonging to the children. The rumors about Viola written in it are true. Viola really does have a horror slave. Horror extracts the children's souls, turning them into puppets, and they are filled with fear. They try to escape but are caught and eaten by Horror. Sophie couldn't understand why the parents of the children didn't go to the police. But Gina told her, this city is full of crime. It's no surprise that people go missing. Many of the parents of the children who were victims also disappear for no apparent reason. They then found a spooky room. It seems that this is the location where Horror was summoned. Meanwhile, in Viola's room, Sword is in a difficult situation. Faced with such a plump woman, he could only close his eyes and endure, as if undergoing torture. Just at the critical moment, Viola suddenly turned around and left. She has already sensed that Gina and Sophie have entered her forbidden area. Gina takes out a magic potion and gives it to Sophie, allowing her to have a means of self-defense in a crisis. At that moment, a group of black cats suddenly appeared around her. Viola also appeared. At this point, Viola also guesses their identities. Observing the large ring in Viola's hand, Sophie realized that it might be the ring that controls Horror. Viola didn't seem to be panicked at all. Suddenly, the magic array under her feet emitted a red light. Gina then throws the magic potion. After a burst of light, Viola is knocked to the ground. Gina had already deduced that the rumors were false. If this ring really contained the power to control Horror, it would not break so easily. Viola doesn't have control over Horror. She was Horror herself. Years ago, when she drew the magic array, Horror was indeed summoned. But the ring in her hand was a fake. She couldn't fool Horror. Horror ate her instead. Viola has become a monster. Suddenly, numerous tentacles started attacking Gina. Gina takes out a dagger and swings it, cutting down the tentacles. Suddenly, a magic array appeared in front of Sophie. and Horror 1 was about to emerge from it. At that moment, a golden light flashed. The magic potion in her hand took effect. The fragile Horror doppelganger was instantly destroyed. At that moment, Viola, who had transformed into Horror, was stabbed by a large knife and passed away. It was Sword, who had been wanting to kill her for a long time. Have you ever seen a movie theater that eats people? Recently, many people have clearly been watching comedy movies, but somehow sad to leave tears. When the movie ended, the girl vanished silently and appeared in another dimension. She looked at the horrible things in front of her but called out the names of her relatives. As a demon mage who hunts horror, Luke senses that a man-eating horror has appeared. So he had to go to the cinema alone to investigate clearly, but he watched several movies in a row. Did not find any abnormal. He can only stay here for a few more days. On the other hand, Sword and Sophie are also occupied with their investigations. Sophie used the internet to find out about the missing people in the cinema. It is rumored that all the missing people had previously sat in seat 13 of row L in the movie theater. And today when Luke went to the cinema to investigate again, he happened to be sitting in that seat. He carefully observed the suspicious individuals around him, but there was nothing unusual. Suddenly, a voice called out his name, and on the big screen, there was a footage of his father training him when he was young. The projector was flickering strangely. When the movie ended and everyone left, Luke was nowhere to be found in his seat. Meanwhile, Sword was working out when he heard the news that Luke had disappeared. He immediately rushed to the cinema where Luke disappeared. According to the guidance of the ring in his hand, there is indeed a faint aura of demons present. He arrived at the cinema lobby. The ring sensed that Horror was right in front of him. The Sword did not see Horror because the cinema was itself Horror. In another dimension, a giant eyeball was staring at Luke, surrounded by thick muscular tissue. He was in a daze and completely defenseless, and was swallowed whole. Luke saw his father teaching him swordplay when he was a child. He wanted Luke to become a demon knight as soon as possible by putting on armor, but the young Luke was very weak. At that moment, Luke's mother suddenly appeared, appearing gentle and soothing, but Luke could not see his mother's face clearly. At this moment, Sword is searching for the entrance of the boundary. He remembered the seat number that Sophie told him. Then he took out his sword and stabbed it hard. The chair started to twist and split immediately. Then, Sword appeared in front of the giant eyeball. In the eye, there was Luke who was hallucinating. At that moment, Sword's voice entered Luke's mind. He loudly warned Luke that it was a trap. Luke was awakened by Sword. The calm image turned scarlet. But Luke had already woken up. It's true that he didn't become a demon knight, but he became demon mage. Facing the huge horror, Luke pulls out his double guns and starts a magnificent show. He sprinted toward Horror's head, brandishing his enchanted gun and firing madly at the creature. Finally the black giant was beaten, ashes like fog dissipated, but the battle was far from over. Suddenly, a massive eyeball appeared in the void. Who says mages can't use swords? Luke picked up a long sword from the ground and charged toward the giant eyeball. Sword, on the other side, took up his sword and attacked as well. Under the attack of the two strongest horror hunters, the giant eyeball was completely destroyed. There is no doubt that Sword saved Luke this time. But Sword does not care. But Luke still intends to repay his favor at a later time. Recently, in this city, many beautiful women have gone missing without explanation. They all received invitations from El Dorado, a legendary place that promises happiness. However, as soon as they accept the invitation, they are eaten on the spot. Sophie's brother also disappeared because of El Dorado, so she has been helping Demon Knight investigate the news about the man-eating horror in El Dorado. She gave Sword a suspicious address and hurried back home. Sword and Luke infiltrated the warehouse, with Sword punching through the disguise of Horror's barrier. Then, Luke drew a magic circle on the ground, and a passage appeared underneath. The two went down to the basement, where several unconscious humans were being held captive. They were all brought here by Horror, who would eat them one by one when hungry. Since there were too many hostages, Luke had to request backup from headquarters. However, the response was that they were short-handed because of a more terrifying threat attacking humans. Meanwhile, Sword noticed a map on the wall, which marked Sophie's location. He then left Luke to free the hostages while he immediately rushed to Sophie's place. At the same time, a man who resembled Luke was watching the welfare house where Sophie was located. At this moment, the nun was announcing good news to the children that they would go camping together next month. Sponsored by someone, the destination was called El Dorado. Suddenly, the doorbell rang, and it was the philanthropist who planned to sponsor them. However, it was not the agreed-upon date, and he insisted on taking the children to leave now. Despite the nun's repeated objections, he entered. Eventually, he revealed a terrifying face. The nun immediately told Sophie to take the children and run away. She stayed behind to stall for the children, then she tore open her skirt and took up a fighting stance. She was able to fight the man-eating horror back and forth. But the other party was not human. After transforming into horror, the nun turned around and tried to run away. Unfortunately, the horror's tentacles caught her and lifted her in the air. At this critical moment, Sophie returned and shouted at horror, attracting its attention. At the critical moment, the man who looks like Luke suddenly appeared and blocked the fatal blow. He approached horror and pulled out a long knife, killing him instantly. However, he was not here to save people but to capture Sophie and take her to El Dorado. The nun grabbed his ankle. Even though she was severely injured, she used her last strength to protect Sophie. The man's face showed a fierce expression, and he lifted the nun and drove a long knife through her chest. Sophie was standing there in shock, filled with sadness, fear, despair, and anger. At this moment, Sword arrived and recognized each other. The man in front of them was Rhaegar, the former strongest Silver Knight who joined El Dorado and fell into darkness to become the Dark Knight. Suddenly, a bullet interrupted their conversation. The shooter was Luke, who had been looking for the Silver Knight for quite some time and said he was going to kill him himself, because he's Luke's father, who killed Luke's mother to become stronger, and fell into darkness to become a member of the horror camp. Luke was a demon mage who hunted horrors to protect humans, and now, he had to fight against his own father, who joined the horror camp. There was no more family relationship between them, and every move was aimed at killing the other. However, Rhaegar was still the former strongest Silver Knight and had become even stronger after falling into darkness. After a few rounds, Luke gradually fell behind, and his weapon was also knocked away. Then he stabbed Luke's body. At this critical moment, the Golden Eagle suddenly appeared and saved Luke. As Sword walked, he took off his shirt, revealing his muscular physique. On the other side of the city, demon mages disguised as waiters were busy preparing barriers to reduce the damage to the city. An old man asked Sophie why Rhaegar wanted to capture her, but Sophie didn't know why Rhaegar wanted to take her to El Dorado. Mayfang immediately led her into the sewer because it was filled with barriers that could protect them and keep them safe. Suddenly, a horror appeared and tackled Sophie, but Mayfang kicked it away and pulled Sophie along. Countless horrors then appeared in the sewer, surrounding them. Mayfang pulled out a spell at the last moment and detonated it. Thus the two of them escaped death. Meanwhile, Sword had transformed into a Golden Knight and was in a fierce battle with Rhaegar. Rhaegar was excited by Sword's strength, as he had not encountered such a strong opponent in a long time. Their weapons clashed in the air, and just as they were in a deadlock, Rhaegar dealt a blow that sent Sword flying. Rhaegar wanted Sword to abandon his beliefs and ideals and join El Dorado, so he could be as powerful as Rhaegar. But Sword's belief was to protect humans, and his power existed to protect them. Rhaegar did not say anything more, and instead unleashed his dark power. He wanted to completely shatter Sword's belief with his overwhelming strength. The building was instantly reduced to rubble, and the entire city was plunged into panic. Rhaegar wanted to use this method to show Sword that his beliefs and ideals were worth nothing in the face of absolute strength. This plunged Sword into his memories of watching his sister burn to death in a fire. Helpless to save her, he did not want to be helpless like he was before, so he put down his giant sword. A real man should fight with his fists. Sword pinned Rhaegar to the ground and repeatedly punched his face. Rhaegar, however, continued to taunt Sword. The two fought from the ground up into the sky, with rain starting to fall. In the distance, demon mages were using magic to constantly erase people's memories. Currently, the Sword is getting stronger and stronger, facing Rhaegar, who was charging at him again. Sword knocked him down in an instant. A heavy kick sent Rhaegar flying. Rhaegar was clearly badly injured, but Sword didn't give him a chance to catch his breath. He prepared to deliver a final blow, but when the smoke cleared, Rhaegar had disappeared without a trace. After the battle, The city was in shambles, and the authorities believed it was an unexplained terrorist attack. Rescuers were searching through the rubble, trying to find survivors. Sword looked at the ruined building in front of him and felt like it was a nightmare. To prevent such accidents from happening again, he decided to take the initiative to find El Dorado, because El Dorado was looking for Sophie. And with the nun dead, she had no one left. Sophie decided to join Sword on the journey to find El Dorado. Luke looked at the devastated battlefield, feeling a mix of emotions as he watched the displaced innocent civilians. He wished he was stronger to stop his father from causing such destruction. He remembered when he was young, his parents trained him in swordsmanship. His father was a silver knight and his mother was an excellent demon mage. In order for Luke to grow up faster, they would occasionally bring Luke along to fight horrible creatures. His father wielded his sword with precision, cutting down each horror with ease, while his mother Kanami shot her twin guns relentlessly, quickly dispatching the rest of the enemies. But young Luke is in danger. He's about to be eaten by a horror. Luke's mother grabs the horror's ass, throws him off, and fires her guns. Luke is stunned by what he sees. Rhaegar, Luke's father, was too busy fighting and killing the horrors to notice the danger that Luke was in. Suddenly, he spotted a big monster among the group of horrors. It was obviously the leader of the pack. Rhaegar immediately became interested in fighting it, as he had always sought out strong opponents. But after a few short encounters, the horror was defeated and began to run away. He transformed into a silver knight and effortlessly killed the giant horror. Back at home, Luke overheard his parents arguing. Rhaegar, who always sought more power, wanted to study forbidden magic from a book, but Kanami believed the book was too evil. They had a heated argument, with Kanami threatening to burn the book, while Rhaegar became more and more consumed by his desire for power. He would not allow anyone to stop him from becoming stronger. The two couldn't understand each other, and the argument escalated into a fierce battle. Kanami refused to let Rhaegar fall into darkness, and even if it meant killing him, she was willing to do so. The scattered candles in the room ignited, and in the flames, their irreconcilable differences reached a point of no return. Luke couldn't bear to watch and called out for his mother. This distraction allowed Rhaegar to strike a fatal blow to Kanami. Rhaegar had fully fallen into darkness, and the Silver Knight was no more. His armor, once shining silver, had been corrupted by his inner demons, and he became a force of destruction. On her deathbed, Kanami passed her twin guns to Luke and taught him that true strength was not for oneself but for others. After coming to terms with everything, Luke decided to go to El Dorado to find his father. Rhaegar, have you ever encountered a bathroom that devours people? Why would he willingly summon demons and sacrifice his wife to them? His name is Matthew, and he used to be a successful businessman. He, along with his wife and child, lived a luxurious life in a bustling city. However, due to a failed investment, he was forced to open a dilapidated motel in a remote western town. But one day, he found a monster in the hotel. It was like a liquid that ate guests who entered the bathroom, and then it slipped away down the drain. He was terrified by this revelation. However, when he saw the various valuables left behind by the deceased guests, he realized that this could be his opportunity to return to the big city. Eventually, he formed an unspoken agreement with the monster, and they began to cooperate. Today, the demon knight named Sword, who was heading west, arrived at this motel. They were planning to stay here for the night, although Sword realizes that this inn is a bit suspicious, but he was soon drawn to Gina. Matthew's growing obsession with money gradually twisted him into a violent and ruthless person. His wife and child only wanted to live peacefully with him, but he was determined to earn money and return to his previous life. His wife wanted to dissuade him, but it only resulted in a brutal beating from her husband. As the mother's screams echoed through the room, their son could only cower in bed, afraid to intervene. Meanwhile, Gina and Sophie were taking a bath in the bathroom. Having just finished washing, they suddenly saw a liquid-like monster appear before them. Gina quickly pulled Sophie aside and cast a spell with one hand. The liquid horror was temporarily repelled, but it quickly escaped through the plumbing and ended up in Matthew's room. Horror expressed that it had encountered a formidable opponent and needed to consume humans to strengthen itself. Matthew's wife witnessed this scene, and Matthew no longer bothered to hide his intentions. He was now consumed by desire and even contemplated offering his wife to the horror before his eyes. Horror promised to fulfill Matthew's desires, and in an instant, it devoured him before shifting its focus to his wife. Just as the situation reached a critical point, Sword arrived just in time to rescue her. However, The crazed liquid horror broke through doors and windows, its body expanding to envelop the entire motel. Then, a colossal humanoid monster emerged from the liquid mass. By this time, Gina had already escaped with the two children. Sword swung their giant sword and transformed into a golden knight, charging forward. Although horror was thousands of times larger than sword, its movements were rather clumsy. Gina released a purple spell, firmly locking down horror. Sword takes this opportunity to finish off horror with a slash. The massive body of horror dissolved into specks of stardust, and the sun once again illuminated the land. Gina has altered the memories of both mother and child. All she remembers is that a hurricane took Matthew's life last night. Sophie wanted to ask if there was any way to help those who had been possessed by horror, but once a person falls under its influence, there is no turning back. All they could do was to exterminate horror and save others, but they couldn't rescue people's hearts. This is a ceremony exclusive to the demon mage. The demon mage roams in darkness, slaying evil spirits to protect humans. During each full moon, they have the opportunity to challenge the guiding grounds. By completing the trials, they not only gain stronger powers but also receive guidance from the divine. Various dangerous beasts and demons lurk here, and defeating them is the first step of the trial. Because this is Gina's ordeal, Sword and Sophie can only watch from the sidelines. Fortunately, Gina's power is extraordinary, and these low-level creatures are no match for her. Of course, the trials and the guiding grounds are not that simple. A monster resembling a minotaur appears behind Gina, with a swing of its massive axe. Gina is sent flying. Her magic arrows have no effect. Realizing the situation, Gina takes out a spear and charges forward, engaging in close-quarters combat with the monster. Seeing that close combat is effective, Gina pulls out another spear. However, this time, luck is not on her side. Clearly, as a mage, she is not accustomed to close combat, but Gina had long made up her mind since the day she became a demon mage. She vowed to eliminate horror and protect humanity by any means necessary. She chants an incantation and stabs her magic knife into the ground. A gigantic magic circle envelopes the minotaur. In a shower of stardust, Gina annihilates the minotaur. Sophie quickly runs over to check on Gina, concerned for her well-being. At that moment, Gina notices a gem on the ground. A deep, resonant voice echoes through the castle. It turns out that the spirit of the guiding grounds has possessed Gina's pet and reveals that the gem is a guardian stone. The stone has the ability to reflect any magical attack and protect its owner, but it can only unleash its true power if the owner has a strong and unwavering will. Otherwise, it's just an ordinary stone. The spirit of the guiding grounds recognizes Sophie's identity and calls her the key to the current calamity. Furthermore, the spirit mentions that the king of El Dorado is searching for Sophie. It was the king of El Dorado who created the magic rings and horror, using the rings to bestow evil and immense power upon individuals. Even as a divine being, the spirit can't see much more information about El Dorado. All they can do is guide Gina and Sophie in the direction of El Dorado. Suddenly, Sophie finds herself trapped in a dream, where she sees her long-lost brother. After a moment, she snaps back to reality. The small pet also returns to its normal state, and the ground beneath their feet glimmers with specks of stardust. The castle vanishes from its original location. Gina decides to give the guardian stone to Sophie, knowing that she is a young girl without the means to protect herself. Luke, also a demon mage, arrives at a remote village. 100 years ago, demonic beasts roamed the world and the knights fought to protect humanity. However, one knight was possessed by horror and slaughtered all of his companions. After 100 years, few people believe in the legend anymore. But Luke, as a demon mage, knows that the cursed knight is sealed within this seemingly peaceful village. Furthermore, he knows that the Dark Rider will soon reappear in the world. Following the guidance, Luke finds a house in the village where an elderly man and his granddaughter live. Relying on each other, the girl is fascinated by supernatural events and has a collection of books. Through her books, Luke learns that on the night of the full moon, the monsters will break free from their seal. Clearly, the villagers don't believe in the ghost and monster legends, but Luke, who has been fighting horror, knows the legends are true. Luke determines the location of the seal not far from the village. He fires a shot into thin air, causing the entire cliff to shake, and the barrier is opened. They enter a mysterious cave within the cliff. They walk for an unknown distance until they reach 4 stone pillars that seem to enclose something. Luke stands before the stone pillars, and the horrific scene from 100 years ago flashes through his mind. He also recognized the other party as the demon knight who hunted horror. He must have been fighting with horror in the darkness for many years, which caused him to be corrupted by darkness. This also means that their enemy this time is extremely powerful. Luke, After going back, he prepared himself well. He went back to the sealed place. He draws magic circles in various places within the cave and sits on a rock, waiting for the moment when the seal will be broken. The moonlight cascaded, bathing the stone monument in its ethereal glow. Luke, upon seeing this, immediately fires his gun. Bullets ricochet unrestrained, triggering the spell array. A green glow encompasses the 4 stone pillars. Moments later, the Dark Knight emerges. Luke springs into action. An explosion of intense energy erupts, enveloping the Dark Knight. However, the Dark Knight had regained their senses and fought desperately to break free from the arcane bindings. In the midst of the struggle, the girl arrived to lend a hand. But Luke's distraction allowed the Dark Knight to break free from the enchantment and charge towards the girl. Luke raises his twin guns and opens fire. But he cannot seem to harm his foe. Casually, Luke grabs a great sword from the rocky ground and charges. However, the Dark Knight seizes him by the throat. Luke, staring at the Dark Knight before him, curses aloud. Once, they were knights, respected and noble, bearing the duty to protect humanity. Now, their momentary weakness had allowed the encroaching darkness to consume them, transforming them into a fearsome horror. Suddenly, numerous spirits appear in the cave. They are the souls of human warriors who fell here in battle. Luke will inherit their will. Luke, wielding the sword, charges at the Dark Knight once more, but this time, the Dark Knight is no match for Luke. Luke drives the sword into the body of the Dark Knight, lifting him up, his other hand continuously firing his gun. At this moment, he is conquering more than just the Dark Knight before him. He is also overcoming his own fear of his father. Later, Luke bids farewell to the girl and her grandfather. Before leaving, he uses magic to erase the girl's memory. When the girl awakes the next day, they remember nothing. They feel as if the legend must have been a fabrication. All the beautiful girls present in the scene were illuminated by the spotlight. They thought they were going to be the center of attention, but soon screams filled the dance floor. Little did they know, the entire gathering consisted of flesh-eating horrors. To them, the taste of young girls was exquisite, perfect for use as fodder. The surviving girl was terrified. She ran for her life. Suddenly, her hair was yanked, and she was forcefully pinned to the ground. But then, a man appeared out of nowhere, embracing the girl in his arms. She thought she had been saved, only for the next moment to reveal the man's mouth silently opening, accompanied by the wriggling of his tongue. The girl's fate was sealed. It turns out the man was also a horror, but his stance differed from that of El Dorado's horror. He came here to defeat the king of El Dorado, so that he can rule over all the horror. The human girl from earlier was merely nourishment to enhance his power. With his eerie tongue, the man could turn his opponents into his puppets, manipulating them at will. Under the crushing force of his terrifying power, all the horrors in the dance floor were instantly wiped out. However, the man didn't anticipate that his every move had been monitored by the king of El Dorado. The king sent his subordinate, Queen, to confront this unwelcome guest. Queen's power is the highest in horror, and she possessed unwavering loyalty to the king. Facing the man's released puppets, she calmly summoned demonic flowers from the depths of hell. The seemingly soft petals were as sharp as blades. Yet, the wounds on the puppets quickly healed. However, Queen seemed to have anticipated this outcome long ago. More vines emerged from the void. And this time, she summoned man-eating flowers from the demonic realm. Clearly, these flowers countered the man's abilities. The man was unwilling to accept defeat. He released his final puppet, distracting Queen's attention, and then transformed into horror himself. But Queen effortlessly blocked his attack, shattering his arm in an instant. The man had no choice but to escape in humiliation. But how could he flee so easily after disgracing the king? The city was filled with the king's spies. The man transformed into horror once again, preparing to escape. But this time, he wasn't so lucky. The Dark Knight Rega erased him with a single strike. Meanwhile, Sword and the others arrived in El Dorado, and Gina had a separate mission to return to the Guiding Land. Sophie was finally able to find the clue to her missing brother. Sword and Luke realized that El Dorado is the land of horror. They began searching for clues throughout the area. Sophie connected to El Dorado's network, and a mysterious person handed her an envelope. He claimed to know the truth about El Dorado. Sword arrived at the designated location and met the enigmatic man. As it turned out, he was a developer of the El Dorado network. Out of curiosity, he had decrypted a file, only to discover that monsters surrounded him. Soon after, he received an anonymous message prompting him to hide immediately and seek out a golden knight named Sword. He also revealed to Sword that the so-called El Dorado was created by a genius programmer, and that programmer was Sophie's brother. At that moment, El Dorado's military forces discovered their presence. Sword and Luke fought their way out with the man in tow. To uncover the truth, they entered El Dorado headquarters. Queen had been waiting for them, and astonishingly, she effortlessly blocked Sword and Luke's combined attack with just one hand and foot. Suddenly, a strange figure appeared and abducted Sophie, who was standing nearby. The sinister Shadow Walker, Bishop, dragged Sophie away and threw her into El Dorado's sea of consciousness. Sword, who had rushed to rescue her, also jumped in. Their souls eventually entered the true El Dorado. When Sword woke up, he was shocked to see his sister, who had long been deceased. Sophie, too, finally reunited with her long-sought-after brother. Meanwhile, the heads of the pedestrians on the road began to turn. They instantly turned into spider monsters with human faces. Following the instructions of the El Dorado system, they began searching for the intruders, and soon discovered Sword. Facing the onslaught of the spider-like creatures, Sword clenched his fists and charged forward. However, their numbers were overwhelming. Fortunately, Sword's sister, Viola, possessed partial control over the El Dorado system and successfully deceived the creatures, concealing Sword's presence. On the other side, Sophie finally met her long-missed brother, Luca. Then she looked at Luca with disbelief. The magic ring that could control horror was on his hand. He turned out to be the king of El Dorado. Sophie angrily accused him of causing countless deaths, but Luca refused to believe her words. He proudly showed her the greatness of El Dorado and informed her that soon, El Dorado would be connected to the entire world, and all of humanity would move there. Unbeknownst to Luca, this so-called migration meant the death of humanity. This is a plot by horror to keep the human race in captivity. At that moment, Viola found Sophie, and they came to rescue her. The Dark Queen appeared once again, and her countless released tentacles intercepted Sword. Sword, in his spirit state, was unable to transform into the Golden Knight in El Dorado, and was finally bound by Queen's control, and Viola, utilizing her permissions, sent Sword back to reality. Sophie, who was beside them, embraced Luca in despair, and jumped into the abyss. The siblings woke up in the real world, finding themselves in an abandoned place filled with human remains. As they looked around, Luca seemed to hear the mournful cries of countless lost souls, causing him to collapse under the weight of it all. In a state of despair, Luca's once steadfast resolve crumbled, and the purity that defined him faded away as the horror within the cursed ring corrupts him. Even in the face of Sophie's desperate pleas, Luca could no longer awaken from his trance. Uncontrollably, Luca extended his hand adorned with the cursed ring, and a dark red horror essence gushed forth, devouring him in an instant. With Luca's demise, the ancient horror king, the true ruler of El Dorado, was resurrected, wielding the power to bring destruction upon the world. Witnessing this horrifying sight, Sword had no choice but to swiftly flee with Sophie. Meanwhile, at the heart of El Dorado, the king initiated the colossal device created by Luca, connecting it to every network in the world. People's phones began operating autonomously, and soon everyone collapsed unconscious. At that moment, the souls of all humanity were drawn into El Dorado by the king's power. In the midst of this chaos, Viola arrived with a crucial message. In order to stop the king of El Dorado and save humanity, they must take control of El Dorado's central system using Luca's administrator privileges. However, El Dorado was established by Luca for Sophie, implying that she should also have the necessary permissions. Driven by the urgency to rescue humanity from its impending doom, Sword made the decision to confront the king of El Dorado directly. He and Sophie entered El Dorado once again. As they ventured inside, countless humanoid spider creatures swept in their direction. Sword stood alone to intercept them while Sophie proceeded towards the core of El Dorado to prepare for system shutdown. Seizing the opportunity, the king of El Dorado caught Sword off guard and swallowed him, trapping him in the realm of emptiness. In this black and white world, the absolute domain of the king, Sword gradually succumbed to the erosion of nothingness, losing all color. On the other side, the Dark Queen battled against the demon mage Gina in a fierce fight. Queen revealed her true dark form and Gina was overwhelmed by it. Meanwhile, Luke was at a disadvantage in his confrontation with his father, the Dark Knight Rhaegar, and sustained heavy injuries. The fate of humanity seemed sealed. However, Sophie, who always believed in Sword, refused to give up. Despite the excruciating pain, She plunged her hands into the core system of El Dorado, calling out for Sword. Finally, Sword regained consciousness because humans, in any era, never cease to resist destruction and continue to struggle. As Demon Knight and the Guardian of Humanity, they would never surrender but wield their swords to sever the darkness, even at the cost of their lives. Luke resolutely raised his sword, knowing full well that his opponent was unbeatable. After suffering another devastating blow, he activated a preset magic circle. The earth-shattering energy caused a tremendous explosion, momentarily halting the Dark Knight Rhaegar. Gina, sitting on her knees, faced the Dark Queen. She rose with disdain, facing Queen's fierce attack. Gina, with the cooperation of her demon pet, she drove her demonic chariot straight into Queen. Then Gina grabbed her magic-enhanced Gatling and fired wildly at Queen of Darkness. Under the terrifying firepower suppression, Queen was finally killed by Gina. Meanwhile, in the realm of nothingness, Sword fought fiercely. The Garo's raging power boiled within him. He finally broke through the blockade and defeated the King of El Dorado. Luca's soul was finally released. He said his final goodbye to his sister, Sophie. In extreme grief, Sophie entered the password to shut down the El Dorado system, and humanity was finally saved. At this point, the Dark Knight Rhaegar, perhaps out of familial affection, spared Luke. Now, he could finally have a fair fight with Sword. A furious battle ensued. Their sharp weapons clashed wildly. Sword was amazed by such a formidable opponent. The two, swept up in the thrill of the fight, abandoned their weapons. Their explosive punches ignited a fiery passion within them. Then, the final showdown between light and darkness. In that split second, as quick as lightning, the golden sword pierced through Rhaegar's dark armor. Finally, Rhaegar laughed, satisfied. His body dissipated, returning to the darkness.